So, welcome once again to African Freedom News. I'm Nzingha Dalila,
And I'm Aaron Olinger.
and African Freedom News is for people who want to survive and thrive. And today we're going to cover some information around some of the tragedies that have happened in our community recently. We had some other ideas about some things we were going to do, and then it seemed like one thing after another happened with, Mr. Floyd, and um, so sad, such a tragedy. But it's something that we need to talk about, especially in terms of surviving and thriving. And so I'm going to go to our first. You see it now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So this first article is from the Chicago Tribune, and the title is If Riots Are Not the Answer, What Is? It is impossible to justify the violence, looting, arson, and vandalism that took place in Minneapolis and other cities after the death of George Floyd at the hands of police, smashing windows, torching buildings, and plundering stores do nothing to improve police behavior or help the African American community. They amount to useless destruction, impossible to justify, yes, impossible to understand, not at all. Police have participated in a quiet riot against Black people for generations. The African American residents of Minneapolis have seen graphic video of a gruesome event. The most obvious interpretation of the footage is that a Black man was being calmly, slowly killed by a cop who knelt for minutes on his neck as other officers stood by. The images provided a searing display of police cruelty. There was no reason for Floyd to die, but he did. It would certainly be more constructive for the city's African Americans to respond to this outrage in a civil manner, as befits citizens of a democratic society. But when peaceful requests consistently fail to elicit changes that are a matter of life and death, we shouldn't expect endless forbearance from the victims. The President of the United States doesn't get this. With his usual viciousness, Donald Trump posted a tweet that called the rioters thugs and seemed to suggest they should be gunned down. Quote, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts," end quote. He later said he didn't mean it the way it sounded. Ehud Barak, who served as Prime Minister of Israel, was a highly decorated soldier who had killed terrorists. In 1998, Barak said the tactics used by Palestinians fighting Israel were abominable, villainous, inhumane, and inappropriate. But he also said, if I was a Palestinian at the right age, at some stage, I would have entered one of the terror organizations and have fought from there. Barak was not condoning Palestinian terrorism. He was acknowledging that behind it lay legitimate grievances. The same has to be said of the unrest in Minneapolis. The police department has long been accused of racism and brutality. A 2018 study by 24/7 Wall Street said the city is highly segregated by race and has some of the largest disparities in poverty, income, and home ownership between Black and white residents of any U.S. metro area. I find the destruction tragic, unnecessary, and counterproductive. But if I were a Black person living in Minneapolis, I might feel enough anger and despair to take part. Rioting may be the wrong way to persuade authorities or white Americans to bring about long-needed changes, but that raises the question, what is the right way? The problem for African Americans is that most whites have never been sympathetic to the methods used in the long fight for racial equality. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech at the 1963 March on Washington is now enshrined as a proud moment in American history. But at the time, a Gallup poll found only 23% of Americans had a favorable opinion of this peaceful protest. Asked in 1964 whether mass demonstrations by Negroes are more likely to help or more likely to hurt the Negroes' cause for racial equality, 74% said they would hurt. In 2014, after several African Americans were killed by cops, Black Lives Matter organized rallies to demand reforms. Though some of the protests blocked streets and snarled traffic, they were largely nonviolent. The movement commanded broad support from African Americans, but 59% of whites, according to a 2015 PBS NewsHour Marist poll, said it distracts attention from the real issues of racial discrimination. Most whites reject violent measures to combat racial inequity and reject disruptive, nonviolent demonstrations. But a majority of them agree that racism remains a big problem in American society. So you would think quiet, peaceful, non-disruptive protests would generate a positive response. But no, that's exactly what Colin Kaepernick and other NFL players tried when they kneeled during the national anthem to bring attention to police brutality. And imagine this. In 2018 Washington Post Kaiser Family Foundation poll, 58% of whites said such protests were never appropriate. White America is always insisting that African Americans find an appropriate way to register their complaints and demands. Alas, nothing ever seems to hit the sweet spot. The methods of protest bother most whites more than the abuses that generate the protest. Rioting may not bring about the changes that would establish genuine equality for Black Americans, but neither has anything else. So, what are your thoughts about this, Aaron?
Well, I would say, to me, to have a successful protest, you have to be focused on trying to win the hearts and minds of public support. When you're burning people out, and a lot of people felt like, well, who cares about Target or different places like that because they've got plenty of insurance. Well, that is true. Just like in any mall or any strip mall, your big stores are overcapitalized. That'll be Target, be Cub Foods, that'll be places like that. They've got plenty of money. They got money to rebuild. But the smaller shops, the mom and pops that are in there, from what I'm understanding, many of them will not be able to rebuild. Their American dream is burnt to the ground, and some of them didn't have insurance, and the ones that did don't want to go through that again. I was calling this year of 2020 the retail store apocalypse, because prior to Christmas of 2019, all the retail stores were taking massive hits. A lot of them were filing Chapter 11 bankruptcies. And as we were going into 2020, we had a bad Christmas for retail stores. So even the large stores took a major hit. They were going to close down different chains, different stores, and that was going to put people out of work right there. But then you get into a 2-month shutdown due to COVID-19. So any of those stores that was riding the fence on whether to close or stay open or file Chapter 11 bankruptcy, you just made it possible, almost that alone, to force a lot of them to close more than what they were going to close or completely close altogether. Then you add to that the riots on top of it. I mean, the straw that broke the camel's back was right there. A lot of people, including the mom and pops, could not take that 2-month shutdown, and then coming out of it and going straight into a riot, that was crucial. I mean, you killed their businesses. Then you didn't take in consideration the elderly who may not have driver's licenses no more because of their age and because of other physical limitations. They only shop at the local stores. The go there to get their pharmacies or prescriptions, go to the local banks, go to the local grocery stores. Now, where are they going to go? You didn't take that in consideration. And when the public starts to see this, and and I'm going to also add to it the agent provocateurs that was in there. What started off being a peaceful protest was hijacked by Antifa and probably some agent provocateurs of the police. They mixed in with the crowd. I mean, you should have been able to pick them out because they were the ones wearing the backpacks and had the crowbars and the hammers and the frozen bottles of water. I mean, they had all the dirty tricks, knew all the dirty tricks, and they were causing confrontations between the protesters and the police. They also broke out windows and went in playing like they were going to loot. And too many people had the attitude, follow the leader. So when they start seeing them looting or pretending to loot, they started looting.
Right.
And again, you just killed the businesses. People can't go to work today that worked at some of those stores. And unfortunately for us, because of the lack of education or I'm going to say lack of education, we are part of those retail stores. A lot of our people have to work at the lower level jobs at the Wendy's and the Walmarts and things like that. Now you just put more of us in the unemployment line. And we already know you got close to 20 to 40 million Americans not getting money right now. And it's impossible right now to even get through to the unemployment office on the phone. So if you could control your protests, keep the agent provocateurs out, kept it a certain way, you would have had the sympathy of the American public and even the people of the world. But when you start burning and looting and pillaging, now people will say when the police come in to bash you, those people had it coming. Look how they act.
Yeah,
And
what you're saying, it reminds me of I don't want to say a speech, but I don't know if you heard Killer Mike from
no,
Atlanta. He's a rapper, activist, and he was given the microphone, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, to have a few
okay,
minutes to speak. And he was, he was talking about the community of Atlanta. I think he was talking about that we need to, people need to, you know, need to plot, plan,
mhm,
strategize, organize. He said that's what we need to do, and that reminds me of Kwame Ture, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or who's formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, would always talk about organize, 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 and
mhm,
you know, we what it sounds like is that you know we we under the years and generations of oppression and violence and
mhm,
disenfranchisement and abuse, everything that we have to deal with, we we get to a point where we just kind of lose it, where we just kind of blow up, and we can't, and you can't effectively, pull together, you know, any kind of real change if you're like, half out of your mind. You know what I mean?
oh,
With
yeah,
anger and frustration. And I mean, we get it. I mean, we're Africans, we're black folks, we understand. It's not like we're immune to it. Um, you know, and of course, all the ways, and all the ways that we have tried to, you know, be a part, legislate, vote, take a
mhm,
knee, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? All this stuff, and it just feels like nothing ever works. And I'm not condoning or supporting one thing or the other. I'm just reflecting that it's almost like one of the things I have done is I work with survivors, uh, women who have survived domestic violence.
Okay.
And one of the things that when that and I know that men also are abused, but I'm just saying my experience has been with women. But one of the things that women have done, that when they're after years and years of torture and abuse, just day in and day out, um, being abused, you just get it. The way one of the ways that women try to get some control and cope with, wondering, when my partner comes home today, are they going to be in a good mood, or are they going to be in a bad mood, or what's going to happen, or are they going to, you know what's going to happen. So as a way to try to gain some control and manage the situation, a woman may actually do something to set them off, so that
Okay.
it's like, if I do this, I'll know they'll get angry, they'll blow up, they'll hit me, whatever, and then it'll be over with. And then at least that one will be over with. And I'm just
Right.
using this as an example of sometimes what we see are is the victim trying to manage, trying to respond in a way, like people going out and quote unquote looting, so that they can, because they haven't had anything, or they feel like, this system just keeps, you know, squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, and making it so difficult that if I've got a chance when nighttime comes or whatever, I'm going to bust in there and get what I can or whatever. Again, not to excuse them. You're absolutely right. The mom and pop stores, all these places, their livelihoods ruined. It's just, it's just really, it's really sad that those things happen. But
Right.
but I'm also saying, what I also try to do with women who are survivors, is I try to help them to figure out a plan, a way to escape. It's like,
Okay.
let's think about this, because just antagonizing your partner until they punch you, so you can feel like, well, I've got a little bit of control. At least I'll know today that it's done and over with. That's not the way to live. That's not living.
Right.
It's not living to, you know, just tear up your own neighborhood, set stuff on fire. That's not living. Um, but but what I do is I try to help them come up with a plan. I try to
Okay.
help them talk through what's this feel like, what's going on for you, what holds you back, what keeps you there. Because a lot of times people ask, why do you stay? Why do they stay? Well, there's reasons
Right.
why. You just have to help them figure it out, so then they can figure out how to get through that, through their own
Okay.
fear, you
Mhm.
know. And sometimes, and when you're so afraid, again, like I said, when you're so overwhelmed, you can't think straight. I know if I'm frustrated, if I'm angry or upset about something, I can't even remember that my glasses are on my face. I'm just like, and then later on, you think, oh, I should have said this. That would have been a good comeback or whatever, when you're not upset. But when you're so frustrated and full of fear, you can't organize. So when Killer Mike was saying, plot, plan, strategize, organize, you know,
Well,
yeah.
I'd like to add a little history to that. The most effective protests that I've seen run, say, since the year 2000 up till now, was right there in Cincinnati.
Hmm.
Is They had a major riot. It was somewhere between 2001 and 2004. I can't remember the exact year, but they used a three-pronged attack,
Hmm.
which I thought was genius. Um, along with the protest, they also launched a class action lawsuit against the city for police brutality, and they wanted changes made. And along with taking them on in court, they also launched a boycott. They organized everyone, and they began to boycott stores and things and withhold their money and started dealing more with each other. And based on that three-pronged attack, they were able to change over 105 things that was going on with the Cincinnati police. And I'd been impressed with 20, but 105, I couldn't believe it. Some of the things had to be thrown completely out because they were outdated. Other things had to be tweaked and brought more into the present. And then they had to just come up with ways to improve on the police interacting with the community. But due to that three-pronged attack, they actually affected change over 105 things. And I haven't seen nothing like it since.
Wow.
So I'm very impressed with that.
Yeah.
And instead of letting the Antifa or someone come in and lead you down the road and have you looking like savages, just organizing yourselves and getting out there and mimicking something that has already worked, you would see that you get much more results from that. Because there is power in our money. There's power in our community as far as us coming together to organize and to launch that class action lawsuit as well. I mean, they hit them from so many angles, they couldn't hardly defend themselves. And I just thought that was brilliant how that was handled. I don't know who organized or orchestrated that, but I wish they were still around today to do it again.
Well, I mean, I live in Cincinnati, so I know that they are. And it'll be interesting to see, maybe the people in Cincinnati will be called on to, be a consultant or something. But, I want to point out, and that we talked about this before, is that I've heard people talk about Antifa, and I didn't even really understand what it was. So do you want to talk a little bit and try to explain that?
Well, when I first found out about them years ago, I was kind of for them somewhat from public support, I guess. They were considered anti-fascist. They was against the Klan. They was against the Nazi Party. They tried to join up with BLM when BLM formed. But then later, I began to see that their methods were almost similar to the methods Hitler used to come to power. A lot of dirty tricks, just stuff that they pulled. I just couldn't understand because I thought that they were against all this stuff. And they were actually doing things that I thought they were against. And I was just surprised that the beatings they were giving people, the way they would show up and show out, and how they would provoke the police to attack. And they'd mix themselves on with the crowd to cause the police to attack the crowd because they was attacking the police. They'd shoot them with BB guns. They'd throw bottles with concrete in them at the police, or frozen bottles. They hurling M80 firecrackers at them, or using firecrackers that look like mortars, and would shoot stuff right at the cops. And after a while, I don't care who you are, you're going to snap, and you're going to begin to attack or defend yourself. And there's the innocent protesters can't figure out what's going on, and now the police are rushing them to beat them down or something because the police are being attacked.
Right.
And,
yeah, and I was telling you, I remember seeing a video with somebody with an umbrella. I mean, it's so out of place. I mean, and he had it open. He in one hand he had an open umbrella, and in the other hand he had some object he was smashing windows, store windows, and people were like, "Who are you? And what the hell are you doing here?" And they chased him off.
The umbrella is basically protection against the pepper spray that they would spray you with, but also the pepper ball guns, which are paint guns loaded with pepper balls. They just open the umbrella up and hold it up in front of them like a shield, and that was protection. Now, your common group that's organized in that, seeing someone show up like that and equipped out like that, and then they're carrying backpacks on their back with more gear and crowbars and stuff, and that should let them know that these people ain't from around here. They're from out of town. And, when they run that facial recognition on the looters that are from out of town, they're not going to be able to scan them because their state driver's license isn't going to pop up.
Mm.
So that's the reason why these guys come in from out of town, because they know you run that facial recognition, only the licenses for in that state are going to pop up. And if you're from out of town, you're not going to pop up on their screen. Then they have some sort of big shot guy that finances them, gives them their money. They get paid $200 to $300 to go to protests and start trouble. They're professional protesters. They get paid money to bail them out of jail. They get paid money to pay for their attorneys. They're pretty well covered. They're pretty well protected.
Wow.
And then they're working for whoever pays them. So, if you want to hire them to start some trouble, they're the crew that can do it. And to me, they came in and they literally hijacked those peaceful protests and turned them into chaos and madness.
Yeah.
So people need to recognize what a professional protester looks like and get them out of it. Because some of them are carrying guns on them. Some of them wearing body armor. They ain't coming out there with body armor on for nothing. They've got plans to do some bad stuff, and they're going to make sure they're protected. They're going to leave you to be the one to get hurt. And then they feel like they done their job. They celebrating with a cigar and a cold drink later on or something,
Yeah, well, one thing I always think about when we talk about organizing our people is, is thinking about how our movements have gotten tripped up in the past. What are some of the ways that people might come in and, undercover or whatever to kind of sabotage our efforts, to hijack our movements. And, and how do you prepare for that? Again, that comes with plotting, planning, strategizing, organizing. I mean, you got to think about that. Not just how do you move forward, but I'm going to use a football analogy, which I don't do. I'm not an athlete at all. But if you could think about this, I mean, I know that if you're playing football, you have to understand the whole field, right? You got to understand the different positions and what's going to happen to move that ball forward.
Sure,
and if you think about our movement, whatever that is, whatever our goal is, if it's to reform the police, or whatever, if it's just to, whatever needs to happen to make this system recognize us as human beings, whatever that looks like for you, how do you get there? And how you get there is going to determine whether you really understand the whole playing field. If you really understand all the positions and what's going to happen, and history can tell you that, you can learn a lot from history. Don't just go off half-cocked. So one other thing I wanted to mention, you were talking about one other thing that had been successful in Cincinnati, the economy, the financial piece. And I was thinking about, I didn't know if you knew that, as far as I know, that this other artist, T.I., has kind of started encouraging us to practice, what is it, blackout?
blackout thing.
Yeah, yeah, on July 7th. So, and I hope that everybody maybe would look at that. I mean, it's a simple thing to do. I mean, if on July 7th, you're not supposed to, buy anything, or do any shopping, or at least just patronize, African or Black stores or businesses, then you just do your stuff on the 6th. You know what I'm saying? But at least it would send a message, even if it's just one day, it would really send a message, about how our dollar matters. So,
Could I say
yeah.
could I say something to that? I understand the method that he's talking about. I do feel that it would have power, but I felt he chose the wrong date. July 7th. Most of the stores are going to be gearing up for the pre-4th of July sales and the July 4th sales. And on July 7th, nobody's going to care on
Hmm.
July 7th because they've already got the money. All right. People came in for the sales. If you're going to affect any sort of difference, you got to do it during the sale period, not afterwards after everyone's already spent their money. So I felt
Yeah.
that the date you chose was totally wrong.
Well, I thought about that, but then I thought, what honestly, I'll just be honest. I thought that a lot of people probably would not have enough self-restraint to
Sure.
not not patronize businesses around the 4th of July. I mean, that's what I thought, because we know that even when we do have celebrations that are historically relevant to African people, a lot of people just they're like, oh, it's just it's a day off, or I'm just gonna stay home, or I'm not gonna participate in Kwanzaa or whatever. It's just I can't be bothered. So I mean, I don't want to be negative about it, but that was my thinking. I'm thinking I'm thinking that I don't know Ti. I don't know why he did what he did, but I was guessing that people probably wouldn't have enough self restraint to really take advantage of the fact that if we didn't participate in the commerce of the holiday, that would really hurt people. You're right, but that
And let
requires
me
self
also add to
restraint.
that. Let me also add to that. As a vendor, I retail survival gear and stuff. I can honestly say the first 2 weeks of the month, people have money. And especially that first week, everybody gets their checks, regular people working, retired people working, those that receive assistance, they all get paid on the first. And most of the stores know that if they have a good first week or first 10 days of the month, they can coast through the last 2 weeks when people have less money, the third week and fourth week of the month. But if you're going to have a major impact, you have to impact that first week. And if
Right.
you can impact that first, you've done something
Yeah.
because everyone knows that everyone's got money during that first week.
Yeah.
So July 4th, the third and the fourth, they're going to be counting on people spending a lot of money. If that money was withheld, they're going to feel it. You
Right.
can trust them with that.
We thinking about history and really capitalizing, for lack of a better word, on our spending power, our the power that we have. I think about the Montgomery boycott, and how organized and committed, and how not when I say organized, we had to, I imagine, because I wasn't born then, but in order to have to pull off that successful bus boycott, our people had to work together. We had
Mm-hmm.
to encourage each other when things were hard, because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people had to walk to work, or they had to carpool or something. They had to make it happen. I mean, to make it, they had to make some sacrifices. They had to work together and motivate each other. One of the things that I thought was, to me as an organizer, to think how fascinating, what made that successful were the evening rallies. Where people would come together and motivate each other, encourage each other, really lift each other's spirits, and then again have that organization and that planning to successfully maintain a bus boycott. I
Okay.
mean, and so we as a people need to get to that kind of level of commitment and cooperation. And I believe we can. We just need to have those kind of conversations to make those kind of things happen. So I want to
Okay.
get to the next one, and
Sure.
let's see, get to it again. You can see this one?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Get to the top of it. This one has had this kind of weird thing sometimes where it seems like this video just comes on without me wanting it to, so hopefully it won't happen. Oh, wait a minute. That's not the one. Oh, wait a minute. Is that the one I just read?
I think so.
Okay,
Yes.
that's not the one I want. Sorry. There it is. Close that one. Make sure that one closes. Okay. This one is from a television station, KGW8. The article is, "It's about time you stood up for us. Black community in Portland weighs in on unrest transpiring." Uh, and so this is written by, I guess, a KGW reporter. So the article talks about in first person. So you'll hear me reading about I and me and stuff like that, but it's the reporter. KGW spoke with people in the African American community who generally feel peaceful protests. Let me get my peaceful protests alone aren't enough to get their messages across to evoke change. Let's scroll down a little bit. Outrage over systemic injustices and racism deeply rooted in our society are boiling over. African Americans and people of all colors and backgrounds are taking to the streets in cities across the country, peacefully protesting the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. But as we've seen, including here in Portland, many feel that alone is not enough to get message across and to evoke change. KGW caught up with African American business owners and young people in North and Northeast Portland on Sunday to get their feelings on the unrest transpiring here and around the nation. Perspectives are as diverse as each individual we talk to. "It's always been a difficult time being Black in America," said Kyrie Williams, who lives in Portland. "They haven't felt heard at all. It's the only way they're getting enough attention, and maybe somebody will listen to them. If not, don't be surprised if things get out of control even more." Key Nelson, the owner of Food Cart Key's Loaded Kitchen off Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Northeast, feels both peaceful protests and riots are necessary. Down here. "Stop killing us, stop murdering us," Nelson said. "If we keep walking up and down this street saying no peace, no justice, no peace, without no action, we are going to get the same continuous reactions. So it is what it is. A new generation is out here not playing no games." A young woman, sorry about this, let's scroll down a little bit. Let me get my A young woman we spoke to, who chose to remain anonymous, says it strikes a chord with her every time a Black person dies in a law enforcement related incident, because it could have been her or her family. She says, "They can't sit back and let the killing continue any longer." Quote, I'd rather it be peaceful, but what is going to enforce change?" she said. "Why do we have to prove our humanity? We can think, we can act, we can talk the same as you. We can put on our drawers and the same as the next person. I don't understand why we're not being seen as that. Why we have to fight so hard to be seen as that. It's not fair. If we come together and unite as one and continue to push for change, we can make something happen. But I know it's going to take a lot of work because we've been working at this for a very long time," she said through tears. The death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police is one of countless injustices against Black people in America. Namie Overton, a student at Grant High School, told us this incident added to her and her friends' and family's anger and made everyone more fed up. The community is sick and tired of being sick and tired. Portland's African American community doesn't want to see anyone hurt or small businesses already struggling due to COVID-19 pandemic broken into or looted during the riots. Some people we spoke with don't support the destruction, but support the cause behind the action. Windows and buildings can be fixed, but you can't bring back a human life. If people are more upset over Target getting destroyed than an unarmed Black man's life being taken away, they said that's an issue. So I'll just stop right there. And I'm going to close that. Takes a minute. So that's kind of continuing on with some of what we were talking about. But, I mean, there were business owners who also saw, that something's got to change. Um, Young people, teenagers who are hurt, angry, frustrated, just feeling like, there's a lot of stuff going on.
I mean, if you add to it also the financial crisis that we are all under right now, a lot of people have gone 2 months without working. We received one stimulus check, which everyone admits was below what it should have been. Should have been at least $2,000 or higher. And they're supposed to give another stimulus check in May. That's still being held up. We haven't received that. So seeing that there are still people struggling trying to pay their bills for April and May, that put people under extreme stress. I personally know people that had to make a decision whether try to pay bills or to buy food, and no one should have to be under that type of pressure. We're supposed to be the land of milk and honey, the land of opportunity, but here it is. You have to decide whether to pay your bills or eat, and with people not being able to work, locked into their homes, and then having that additional bill pressure put up on them. It was a powder cake waiting to explode. It wasn't going to take much to ignite it. I'm just sorry to see that Mr. Floyd had to die and be the one to be the spark that caused the explosion. But I personally thought it was going to be financial collapse of the stock market or something else. So I was kind of taken by surprise that happened on that day. And I was not surprised at the civil unrest behind it. I expect.
One of the things I think that's also maybe that's added to the tension, and I don't really want to try to speak on the mind of white folks. I don't, but but we do know historically as well that when that when we have when our country experiences economic distress, that the poor
Mm-hmm.
white working people seem to really, really act out, and they take it out on us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really it seems like, I don't know, maybe it's also a combination of there's more cell phones with cameras and all this stuff, but there's a lot of, it seemed like there's been a lot of real like increased hate and animosity towards people of African descent. I mean, just screaming at us, following us, and it's been coming more and more and more often. Like, I mean, kids can't, sell lemonade. People can't walk down the street. It's like, you can't. it just seems like it's happening more and more. And I think all of this has added, I mean, to this tension of, just experiencing one after another, after another, after another, incidents of violence, threatening violence, you know, death. I mean, it's just been horrendous, and it's just become um, just overwhelming. It's just and I think it's interesting too that you know young young people. I mean, a lot of people, young people, are just aghast, maybe because they thought that things were better. That they just kind of like what, and just like this just can't happen. And I really do hope that there's some positive change that comes out of it. Maybe like you were talking about, like what's happened in Cincinnati, maybe people actually beginning to pull back and create some real plans. Um, I'm kind of of the mind that this system is working the way it's supposed to, which means that we're not a part of it. But you know, but trying to work with the system, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an anarchist, but and I'm not condoning any violence or anything like that. But my mind is more towards how can we as a people begin to plan and strategize and organize for ourselves to have how do we engage in self-determination? How do we I'm not saying everybody has to leave. And I love Africa. If you don't want to go to Africa, that's fine. But if you don't, you can't go to Africa or whatever. This is also how do we have a place here that really reflects who we are, and a system that is that we determine what we want instead of trying to come to somebody else's table and ask them to give us a seat and allow us to be there. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm at.
And so that's the reason why I push self-reliance, because you have a group of people right now that's going off grid, living off grid, they're going out into the woods or somewhere, and they're totally going out to themselves and living their own life without the interference of the government or anybody coming in telling them what to do. And they provide their own power, their own food, they're living off the land, they're living a subsistence living. And to me, that's true freedom right there, because you're not on nobody's program. You're not counting on a handout or someone telling you what you can do or can't do. You're going out and making your own life and living the way you want to live. And to me, that's true freedom. So that's the reason why I keep pushing for people to become self-reliant as much as possible.
Yeah.
Don't count on anybody to come and help you. You're responsible for your own life, not others.
And it's interesting that you said that because, living on the grid, living as we do, the people who are, don't practice, at least trying to become self-reliant, um, we become so complacent, so accustomed to having everything given to us, having everything made so easy and simple for us that we lose the the confidence, the self confidence, that we have the ability to even be self reliant. So
Mhm.
it being really being organized, really moving towards that freedom requires a shift in your mind. Being able to really look honestly about how, I mean, I know I've got internet, I've got electricity, I've got running water, I've got all this stuff that I'm grateful for, and it makes me really comfortable. But I also know that I want to work towards, if I need to, not having to be dependent on this stuff. And the
Right.
more that I've
And,
worked on that, the better I feel.
and I feel that you're right there. You're right on point. Another thing that I feel that is a trigger for trouble right now is the rising costs in food. Food shortages are approaching. Just use steak and hamburgers example, 80% higher in price than what it was a month ago. And produce is going up, eggs is going up, milk is going up. If you are living paycheck to paycheck and you are living on a tight budget, enjoying very little luxuries, now everything is going up except for your paycheck, you know. And now you've been off work for 2 months, don't know if you're going back to work because you're occupying a job that they may feel they don't really need you. You're not able to work from home and get paid. So, I mean, that's a crushing weight that parents have to carry on them. I mean, no one wants to see their children go to bed sick or even go to bed hungry. But now you have to make decisions. Do you eat? Do you pay bills? Do you go to the doctor, or do you try to tough it out? And I've personally found that anytime you try to tough it out, health problems get worse. They don't get better. They don't cure themselves. So you're under a tremendous weight right now, and it's crushing a lot of people. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to find workarounds. I mean, if you can't afford to produce, grow your own. If you can't afford to buy the meat, raise chickens, learn the local laws. I mean, in my area, we're allowed to have 6 chickens. And if I didn't want to do that, I could raise rabbits, meat rabbits, they call them, and I can have my own meat. How about go out and learn how to fish so that you can go out, get your fishing license. You can go out and put fresh meat on the table every day at no cost to yourself other than just digging up the bait or having to buy a little bait. And you can get around some of these higher costs. But you have to find.
Now you're getting into our next segment, and so you kind of jumped ahead, but that's okay. So you just have to come back to it. But I want to go ahead and introduce our next segment, which is, we talk about African Freedom News is for people who want to thrive, who want to survive and thrive. And Aaron is our preparedness survival strategy expert. And so I'm going to get to our next. And so I'm going to get to our next point. Hopefully I'll get here. Do I have it? Whoops.
Yes.
Okay. So, whoops, I got to go back. So I'm just going to turn this over to you, and you're going to be talking about basic survival resources, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
Okay. To me personally, anyone that's preparing for any sort of disaster should be preparing in the mind that their mindset should be that the power grid's going to be down. It has to be the worst case scenario that you would prepare for. So therefore, the grid must be down. There has to be a chance that if the grid is down, water is not coming to your house or to your property, because when the grid goes down, so does the pumps that pump the water. So does the pumps at the gas station. They can't pump gas. Banks will be down. I mean, worst case imaginable will require the grid to be down. And then the 5 things that you want to focus on, or at least the 5 categories that you want to prepare for, is going to be water, food, medicine, fuel, and defense. Those are your top 5. Now, there's some others, but we're going to deal with those 5 first, because that's where your money's going to be limited, resources. You're going to have to allocate a little bit here and there. And we're going to start off with water first. And water, your body can only go 3 days without it. And I'm going to give you a little bit more information on water. When you're about 2% dehydrated, you feel a sensation of thirst. When you're 5% dehydrated, you're extreme thirst. At 10% dehydration, you start to have problems with your organs. You start to have what I call a foggy brain, start having problems being able to concentrate. And then when you get to 15 to 20% dehydration, death ensues. And that's not very much dehydration, knowing that the body's mostly made up of water, but 15 to 20% would mean your death. So water is critical to human life. And then going along with that, things, like I said, you can only go 3 days without it. You don't want to drink contaminated water, because right then and there, that's going to put you in the same trouble. You might only live 3 days to a week after drinking contaminated water. Second thing you have.
Can I ask you might be able to tell me this or not, but my understanding is that when I start to feel thirsty, I am dehydrated.
Right, but you're only when you start to first feel the sensation, and you just feel slightly thirsty, you're only 2% down. At 5%, you're extremely parched at that point.
Okay.
And again, that's not very much dehydration, but that's how crucial water is for your body to be able to function, be able to think, everything, for your organs to operate properly. Water is crucial. Water means life. Then along with water, you have to decide whether you're going to bug out to a location.
You make me want to drink water now. I'm thirsty, so go ahead.
Okay. Whether or not there's going to be a well there, whether there's going to be a creek or river or pond. And if you're going to try to stay in the city, again, is there a well on your property? If there's not a well, then how are you going to access that water? Do you know where there's a stream or river? And if the water's got fuel oil or gas floating in it, you can't drink that water anyway. And then along with that water, you have to have the means to be able to retrieve it. So if you have a well, you have to have a pump operating to be able to retrieve it, which means you have to have some sort of power or ability to draw that water out of the well. And if you are picking it up at a river, a pond, or a creek or somewhere, once you retrieve it, do you have the containers to get it in, and can you bring it back? Because water's heavy. It weighs 8 pounds, 3 ounces per gallon. And you get a 55-gallon drum of water, and you're above probably 450 pounds. So water is extremely heavy. If you have a 3.5, what they call water brick, 3.5 gallon water brick, that's going to weigh between 27 to 29 pounds when it's completely filled with water. And just 2 of them is going to have you pretty close to 60 pounds trying to carry one in each hand. That's a lot of weight.
Well, let me just ask you, okay, so let's say something happens. Things are going crazy now. So who knows? I'm not predicting anything. I'm not a prophet, but I'm getting a little worried here. There's curfews now. I wasn't thinking that was going to happen. I see on the news, people, National Guards or whatever, and enforcing people to stay inside. And I don't know how long this is going to go on. I don't know if they're going to escalate. I know, I don't know. I'm not trying to imply anything, but let's just say something happens and I'm living in my home. I'm in an apartment or a house or whatever, and I paid my water bill, I paid my electricity bill, I've done all the things I'm supposed to do to be a good citizen, and now nothing's working. How is that? Help me understand what's going to happen to my water.
Well, in an incident like that, if open fighting and open warfare has broke out into your area, to bring an area back into compliance and to reinstill order, they will cut the power to an area. They will cut your water to an area. I mean, even when you see them put a house under siege, the police surround it, that's one of the first things that they do is they cut the power to the house and cut the water. Because they want to bring you into compliance that much quicker. And we're so used to modern conveniences that a lot of people feel that they can't live without power, but you actually can. But going to the water, I suggest people maintain at least 10 to 15 cases of water in your home. That would give them enough water for a family of 4 for about 30 days to 6 weeks. So that would give you a backup reserve right there in the event you woke up in the morning and your water was cut off. Then along with that, if you had the means to get to a water source and retrieve water to bring back to your property, you have to have the ability to be able to purify it, either through water tablets or have water filters or have maybe just a gallon of Clorox bleach with no fresh scent, no lemon scent, nothing added to it because that makes it poisonous. Just straight bleach and an eye dropper. And basically your formula is 2 drops to a quart of water, 4 drops to a half gallon of water, 8 drops of bleach to a gallon of water. Then it's a half a teaspoon for 5-gallon water cooler. And if it's 55-gallon drum, then you're looking at about 5.5 teaspoons of bleach added to that water to purify the water and make it safe to drink.
Now, I've got some jugs of bleach that say concentrated.
Okay.
Is that a problem or?
No, it has to be pure bleach.
Okay.
You don't want any other type of bleach with any sort of additives. The additives makes it poisonous.
Okay.
But I myself have what is called a Berkey water filter. They are right around $300 and up, depending upon how big a system you get. I chose the 3-gallon one, so it would do about 3 gallons an hour. The filters for it can do up to 5,000 gallons.
Wow.
And it will purify mercury out of water. It takes virus out of water, bacteria. It'll run the full gambit. And it's a very nice system to have. To me, it's worth having. Or you can go with the Water Basics emergency filtration pump system. That's designed for high-risk water. It's around $85. It'll do 120 gallons of water. If there's virus or bacteria floating in the water, it would totally clean that water and make that water safe to drink. The whole system was designed for high-risk water. However, again, if there's oil or gasoline floating in the water, that water is not usable. I wouldn't even mess with it at that point. Okay, go on to the next one.
Okay. All right. Now back to where you started talking about food.
Okay. Food, you just want me to highlight today or you want me to get real critical on it?
Well, go wherever you want to go, but then we're going to talk about the other ones in our next show, right? So
okay,
we're just going to, so as much as you.
I'm gonna highlight a little bit today.
Okay.
On food, you're going to have to choose what's going to be best for you to store back. You should have a food pantry set up. Your food should be based upon 4 categories. Your short-term food is your perishables. That's what you have in your refrigerator and your freezer. And your refrigerator, once the power is cut, will keep the food good for 24 hours. Your deep freeze, keep the food good for 36 hours. After that, it's going to begin to spoil. Then your second level will be food that you can keep that's going to have a shelf life of, say, a year to almost 8 years. And that's going to be your canned goods. There will also be your military foods like your MREs, what they call meals ready to eat. But a lot of your canned goods are set up to go 2 to 8 year shelf life. But it's key that you study the shelf life so that you can rotate your food and you're not taking a bunch of losses on food that's spoiling because you didn't rotate it. And also choose food that you're willing to eat. A lot of people will buy food that they're just looking at trying to have some sort of fancy storage and a bunch of stuff that they would never eat in their regular life. But they feel that they would eat if they was forced into it and they became hungry enough. You don't want to be in that situation because you'll resist eating. Your body has to maintain at least 1,000 calories a day for your organs to function properly. So if you got food that's tasty and good to eat, then you don't have to worry about that. And then I would also recommend salsas,
Now,
barbecue.
I want to make a confession, okay? Because I listen to you and what you say about, being prepared and having something tasty and thinking, so I mean, I don't usually one of my treats is like ding dongs, like Hostess ding dongs, which I usually don't eat them, but if it's like a grid down situation and I'm like sitting there like depressed, I'm like, I got my ding dong. So I don't know. I got something in there that's a treat for me to
Okay.
eat.
And usually the treat foods would fall into that second category. They have about a year to a couple of years shelf life to them. It's very important to maintain morale, because once you reach a point where you're ready to quit, I don't care how much gear you got, how much food you got back. When you lose the will to live, you're going to lose the battle to survive.
Mm.
So to keep that morale up, to keep the family's morale up, you have to stock some treat foods. It could be candies, it could be dehydrated fruits, anything that could be considered a treat food for the family. But that's going to fall into your second level category. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of maintaining morale with treat food. Plus, a lot of treat food can be used in barter and trading with your neighbors in case they have something you need. You might need a gallon of gas from them, and there you got a case of Girl Scout cookies or something. You can trade them for that gas. So it's important to have that kind of treat food. Even
No
coffee.
one can have my ding dongs, though. That's not.
Okay.
That's not. Nah, it's not negotiable. That's not for
Even
trade.
coffee. Even coffee and alcohol during that time period would be considered great barter items for people. And then your third category is going to be your long-term food. That's going to be food that's going to last between 10 years to almost 30 years. A lot of that you're going to repackage yourself. That's going to be your dry products, your beans, lentils, rice, flour, honey, oats, any of that stuff. Once you repackage it, you can get between 20 to 30 years out of it. Even grits has a normal shelf life of 2 years, but when you repackage it using Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers, you'll be able to get 15 years storage out of a pack of grits. Now, when I say rice, let me clarify something there. Rice is going to have to be white rice. White rice is a little less nutritious than brown rice, but it has the ability to be stored long term. Brown rice, even though it has a lot of nutrients that your body needs, will go rancid after 4 years because of the oil that's in it. The oil will go rancid, therefore the rice is no good. That's also a problem that you're going to have with peanut butter, cornmeal, or any sort of product that has any sort of oil in it. After 4 years, that's the end of the shelf life of that food. So that's something that if you decide to have it in your pantry, just know that you're going to have to rotate that out a little bit quicker. And then after you get through your third level, your fourth stage of food preservation is going to be a renewable food source, which that gets into having seeds and having a seed bank put back, as well as probably either raising chickens, bluegills, or rabbits, because they all breed like crazy. That's if you want to have a renewable meat source. If you're not a meat eater and you're a plant eater, then your key to a renewable food source is going to be have that seed bank, and it's just a container or a photo album that you put a bunch of seeds into, packets of seeds. So when it comes time to plant, you're able to grow your own food. Okay, go to the next one.
Well, we were just going to talk
Oh,
about water and food. So I didn't
okay,
have.
that's all we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get to the, and I'll go backwards a little bit so people can see. So in our next show, we'll, depending on how you want to talk about it, Aaron, we'll talk about medicine, fuel, defense, however you want to talk about it. Maybe we'll talk about all three. Maybe we'll talk about one or two. That's up to
Well,
you.
well, let me ask this question. I can cover, I can go more in depth on food today, or do you want, or I can wait till the next show and cover the staples. And by staples, I'm talking basic foods that people should go out and buy right now. Won't be expensive. And I'll have some examples that I can show of what people can go out and get and be able to stock up a pretty good pantry just on basic staples.
Well, I mean, why don't you go ahead and talk about staples? I mean, because if people are thinking right now, like, okay, Nzingha and Aaron, I got it. I need to start doing stuff. Stuff is getting really weird and expensive, and people acting squirrely, and the government. Who knows when I'll ever get a paycheck or a stimulus check or whatever. So, what should people go out and get? I mean, people, you talked about storing some water. If
Okay.
there's some
Yes.
staples that people can start
Yeah.
doing now,
What
what should they have?
staples are you're going to be your meat and potatoes. That's your basics. Like rice would be one. I would definitely suggest white rice for long-term storage, but I also would recommend some brown rice that you can consume for short-term for the nutrition. Um, White rice is less nutritious, but that super long shelf life is going to keep people eating for a long time. Rice is relatively inexpensive. You can stack it up in buckets and it just keeps for a long time. And there's let me see, there's a name of a company called Knorr, Knoor. They have what they call pasta sides and rice sides. You can buy them at the Dollar General or any of the dollar stores. They're only $1. And they have enough rice in there for probably 3 or 4 people to be able to eat. And they have little vegetables added. I'm looking at one right now that's chicken flavor
Mm-hmm.
that I like. They have some with broccoli in them, but it takes very little to cook. You just need boiling water, a little bit of butter, put it in, and 7, 8 minutes later, you have a meal. So if you're short on the ability to be able to cook because your power to your stove is off, and you got a little camping grill, or you have the ability to make a little campfire outside, or something that you can it could be even cinder blocks that you can put some wood under and light on fire and put your pot on top of the cinder blocks. You can, if you can boil water, you can cook rice. It's that simple. Then the next thing I'd recommend would be flour. You want to buy as much of that as you can. Again, not super expensive. You're going to use it in gravies to make food taste better. You're going to use it for coating on your meats. Flour is just many different uses that you can use flour for. Even if you were going to bake fresh bread, then that's going to be important to have. It's going to be flour. Then let's see, and again, pasta. Again, you can get these Knorr packets. They have pasta sides, and pasta is great carbohydrates. The body and the brain needs carbs to function properly, so you can't go wrong having pasta on hand. You can even have what they call the regular white pasta, and then there's also the multigrain pasta that's brown. Now, again, the brown pasta is not going to keep as long, but it's a little bit more nutritious. And if a person's having trouble with, say, their liver is giving them problems, they got fatty liver disease or something, brown rice and brown pasta is going to be what they're going to need to eat. Because when you have that disease, they say if it's white, it ain't right. So anything white, you don't want to consume because it has a negative effect on the liver. Then I myself, I'm a member of my local Sam's Club. So, I went out and bought.
All right.
Okay. There's like 18 boxes in here. Try to get you a membership to Costco or Sam's Club. If you can buy in bulk, it's going to save you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, pasta, again, great for carbs for the body. And you can get macaroni and cheese, macaroni elbows, you can get spaghetti, just the different things like that is great to have. And again, relatively inexpensive. Then next category is going to be oats. And again, I buy at the Warehouse Club.
All right.
Oats is great for sustained energy.
That box looked as big as you are.
Oh, it's big. It's big.
Jesus.
But oats is very nutritious. Out of all the grains, it's considered one of the best grains for nutrition for the human body. I mean, it can energize a horse, so it definitely is going to energize you. And then along with oats, I'd recommend sugar. And with sugar, I'm going to include honey. Raw honey, you don't want to get the honey that's been run through filters because it takes all the healing ingredients out of honey. Deal with mostly raw honey, and that way you know it's real and not fake. And then if you can, when you buy honey, buy it in glass jars. Because if you're storing it long term and it solidifies, which most honey will get hard after a while, you can take that honey, put it into a boiler on a stove, boil some water, sit that jar down in there, and that jar will make that boiling water will make that jar of honey turn back to a liquid, and it's as good as the day it was bought. So just because it solidifies, don't throw it away. The honey's still good. Mm-hmm. And then with sugar, again, some people are going to want to argue how bad sugar is for you. But I'm going to tell you again, for treat food, baking Kool-Aid, different things, you're going to need it. You're going to be baking cookies, trying to bake stuff. You're going to need sugar. And if you want to work around that, then maybe you can use honey as a substitute. But you're going to have to know ahead of time the appropriate things that you can switch on and off with. Right. Then I would say baking soda or baking powder, because it has many uses. You can even use baking soda as a toothpaste to brush your teeth with. It's great for cleaning things, but it's also good for baking. So seeing that it's multi-use, that's a staple that you're definitely going to want to have. And knowing that milk only keeps for so long a time, you're going to want to have some powdered milk if you can find it. Right now, even I'm looking for some. It is extremely hard to find powdered milk. Right. So people are out there snatching it up, because if we get locked into our homes, if martial law is declared, some sort of major disaster happens, and you can't get dairy milk, and you're not friends with a farmer where you can go barter and trade with them, having that powdered milk is going to be key.
And, and I just want to say, already now, when you say that you can't find something, Aaron, that sends up a red flag for me. I'm like, oh my God, But I'm just saying, I'm saying that to say that people shouldn't think that we're just, talking out of our head, like this is just something we're making up. Things are already getting scarce, and maybe things aren't going to be like this forever, but I mean, it's not likely that things are going to go back exactly the way they were. And so the more that we can be prepared and be self-sufficient and learn how to work around these things that are going to change and not come back is going to be so important. And it's happening now. So.
Right. Then along with those things, then I want to recommend sauces. Okay. That's Montgomery Inn barbecue sauce here. We have some ragu spaghetti sauce. And this is cheese con queso sauce. You'd be surprised that how well those things make things taste.
Yeah.
I don't care what you put those on, you put enough of it on. The spaghetti sauce makes everything taste Italian. The con queso sauce, whatever you put it on, great. And the barbecue sauce, what can I say? I mean, you're buying canned meat. Like, I got a big case of this right here. Those little Vienna sausages, you pour enough barbecue sauce on them. I'm telling you, those things taste pretty good.
When we lived out in the country and we were eating squirrels and all kind of stuff, I mean, barbecue sauce will make anything edible. I'm just saying. And, I also want to say, too, that I know a lot of people who watch this stuff. I mean, we're health conscious. We want to try to be as healthy as possible. But, if we're in a grid down situation and we don't know when things are going to come back to a place where we can go out and garden and, and be safe, then you have to be thinking about what you can do to survive, how you're going to be able to get through this.
And then I give you another thing you should be stocking. I just put two examples here. Spices.
Yeah.
Again, some of the food that you're going to be getting is going to come out of a can. It's going to be pretty bland. You got spices on hand and you got sauces on hand, everything tastes good. If it tastes good, people are going to eat. People are going to stay healthy. If they won't eat because something tastes horrible or it's too bland, then you've already failed. So stock plenty of spices. Again, that's super expensive. And everything that I showed, I mean, even going back to like beans, you could get big 25-pound bags of pinto beans. You could get lentils. You can get red beans. You can get black beans, or you can get them canned. Okay. You can have all that stuff already ahead of time. We're talking about having complete meals here, because even another benefit that beans is going to give you is you can get a certain amount of protein from beans. So if you don't have meat, you can get the source of protein that you need just from the beans itself. And, you know, they're very nutrient dense, and you get your body's going to get a lot of out of. So between the rice, the flour, the beans, the pasta, oats, sugar, powdered milk, spices, and the sauces, you can cook entire meals with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and no one's going to starve, and you're not going to put a huge dent in your pocketbook in the process of trying to do it. Now, do you have to stop at that? No, you can add many more things to your menu, but I just want to show the basic bread and butter of the basic staples that you want to have on hand.
Thank you. You know, and I want to share too that, you know, when this pandemic started and people said, you know, you can't go out and all the things that, you know, you needed to try to do to stay safe and stay alive, um, I really wasn't worried because I already had stuff in my home.
Okay. Okay.
You know, and
Right.
if I did dip into some stuff, then when I could go out, you know, I replenished it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't panicking. You know, I didn't freak out. I wasn't stressed. And people probably kind of wondered why I didn't seem very stressed about stuff. I already had masks and gloves and stuff. Like I already had all that stuff. You know, I had
Right.
food. I have lots of water. I have lots of stuff. I mean, I really wasn't that worried about it. And even before this stuff happened, before this stuff jumped off, doing these kind of things to prepare as much as I can for any kind of disaster, grid down situation, or
Mm-hmm.
any situation where it's basically on me because I'm not even imagining that there's some National Guard or anybody from FEMA or anybody coming around to save me. I'm not, it's just not, I don't even want to be, I don't want to be in that situation where I have to be wringing my hands and hoping and, you know, and trying to spell help out on my roof or something like that. I don't want to go down. I don't want to be like that person. So just being able to go through my life day to day, feeling a little bit more prepared is really helps your state of mind. And as
Okay.
Aaron and we talk about your state of mind is really key to your survival, surviving any kind of situation. And so uh, I want to just talk a little bit about thriving and talk a little bit about mental health because one of the things that this all of this situation has brought about too is increased mental distress. Okay. So, like I said, last time I kind of did a PowerPoint on learned helplessness, but I wanted to kind of stay where we were talking about the lynching of George Floyd. And they found this article in this online journal called The Conversation, and it's titled George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery Deaths, Racism Causes Life-Threatening Conditions for Black Men Every Day. And I thought it was good to kind of take a minute and talk about the conditions, how these conditions are impacting our brothers. Obviously, our sisters, our children as well, but this is just one example of how important it is, our mental health and our livelihood. So I'm just going to read this. High-profile police shootings and deaths of black men in custody or even while out jogging brings cries of racism across the country. May 25th, death of George Floyd by a white police officer in Minneapolis and the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia on February 23, 2020 by a white father and son have resulted in outrage and protests in cities across the U.S. But as a public health researcher who studies the effects of racism on the health of black men, I have found that the life and death effects of racism in the U.S. go far beyond police shootings. I also have found that while racism harms many groups of people, black men are paying the highest cost. As a result of racism and associated poverty and injustice, life expectancy at birth of black men is 71.9 years, far below white women, 81.2, black women, 78.5, and white men, 76.4. These are mainly because of black men's higher risk of dying from several types of cancer, stroke, HIV, and homicide. Despite overall declining numbers of homicide in the U.S., homicide remains the #1 cause of death for black males 10 to 24. My research and that of many others strongly links these deaths and poor physical and mental health outcomes in general to racism. For black men in the U.S., racism is a daily experience that harms their health and leads to chronic disease and poor health. About 66% of blacks report high levels of day-to-day racial discrimination. One example is being turned down for a job, as opposed to being treated differently on the job. On average, each black youth faces one major discriminatory experience each year. Discrimination is a major risk factor for health problems across the board, as shown by reviews. There are also blocked opportunities for black men and other types of discrimination that are less frequent but very consequential, also called major discriminatory events. Combined with these discriminatory experiences make living harder and shorter for black men than for other race by gender groups. While discrimination is known to be a risk factor for premature death, heart disease, depression, and suicide, we know black men experience discrimination more than other groups, including black women. As an associate professor of family medicine at Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, a historically black medical school, I study how racism affects a racial and ethnic minority people, particularly black men. My studies have shown that discrimination and racism are root causes of depression, anxiety, substance use, and suicide, as well as poor physical health. In a recent study, I found that a sense of mastery, which refers to people's ability to take control of their life, could reduce psychological distress for black women. For black men, however, high levels of mastery were not enough to reduce psychological distress. In another study, I compared black men and black women for the effect of their educational attainment or on their depressive symptoms and psychological distress. I analyzed data of 3,570 black adults and found that education projects black men less than it protects black men less than it protects black women from depressive symptoms and psychological distress. That means black men are at risk of depressive symptoms and psychological distress at all levels of educational attainment. That is, their success is not enough to reduce their depression and distress. As all these studies have used nationally representative data, Thus, the results are generalizable to the U.S. people. They all show a pattern called diminished returns of economic and non-economic resources for Black men. Although they are also seen for other race by gender groups, they are most pronounced by Black men. As a result of these diminished returns, Black men who have high levels of aspirations and motivation to get to the top of society still get sick, feel unhealthy, and die early. In other words, as long as U.S. unfairly treats Black men, their very same resource would fail to protect them, so they show systemically poor outcomes, regardless of their status in the society. Again, these are not limited to, but worse for Black men. Even the U.S. healthcare system treats Black men worse than Black women. This includes receiving a lower quality of health care compared to whites and even Black women. Such discrimination deteriorates their ability to manage their disease, so they develop worse outcomes and get sicker. One of my papers shows that white men have a specific role in this. My work shows that anti-Black bias is highest in white men than white women. This is very concerning because white men have the highest level of power in law, politics, police, and many other institutions in the U.S. These all mean that odds are not in the favor of Black men. Recent shootings of Black men, either by police or others, also shows that Black men are specifically targeted by white men, the group which also is in charge of law and order. These all are examples of how social structures and biases cause poor health among Black men. Several of my studies have documented high risk of depression in Black men and boys of high socioeconomic status. These studies show higher instead of lower risk of depression as a result of socioeconomic mobility in the U.S. One explanation for this is that they pay a very high price for their ticket to the top of the society. This journey also opens their eyes to the real inequalities that exist in the U.S. society. In another study among Black boys, high income increased the risk of depression, suggesting that high income Black boys are more, not less, depressed than low income Black boys. In yet another study of mine, 25 years follow-up of American adults showed that high education actually increases depressive symptoms of Black men over time. I did not see this pattern in white men, white women, or even Black women. In another study, I found that white men gain more life expectancy from their employment. The gain was smaller, but still considerable for white women and Black women. Black men, however, died earlier regardless of their employment. Thus, in today's U.S., racism is a root cause of poor health of Black men. Given the societal structure, personal assets, and ambitions, such as advanced education, income, and employment, do not insulate Black men from the racism of the American society they live in. In fact, these assets increase the likelihood of Black men to be discriminated. Many studies have shown that racism, discrimination, prejudice, and related environmental stressors have a more prominent role in causing anxiety, depression, substance use, and poor physical health of Black men than Black women. I end this conversation with a few questions for my fellow Americans. How on earth can social mobility make the lives of white Americans easier, but not for Black men? Why should social status increase rather than decrease Black men's exposure and vulnerability to discrimination? Why, for whites, does discrimination vanish if people attain high levels of success, but for Black men, discrimination increases as they move up the social ladder? Why does success increased discriminatory experiences of Black men. Racism, however, is bad for everyone's health, not just Black men. It is just bad in a different way. Everyone dies sooner in a racist community. This is particularly because societal inequalities increase people's vulnerabilities, even the most privileged ones, as I explained in another piece. So those questions, I think our society really needs to answer. Everything
Mhm.
that we think, that we teach our children, that our society says, you need to work hard and, get your own job and be successful and get an education and all this stuff, and you can make it. All of this stuff works against Black men living longer and having mental health. It's crazy, but I think we all know this. I think we all have known this subconsciously. I mean, we see it. If we interact with our brothers, we know how much our brothers are struggling. And we didn't even really talk about the school to prison pipeline and how so many of our brothers are behind bars. We didn't even talk about that. Just mental health is so critical. And these times that we're living in is making it harder and harder and harder, including getting lynched. I mean, ultimately getting lynched.
Mhm.
And it's just so important that we talk about mental health, that we talk about not only just surviving, but how do we thrive? What do we need to do to continue to come through this with healthy minds, a healthy spirit, um, and recognizing some of these problems that we have, I think, is, you can't solve a problem if you don't admit that it's there. And
Agreed.
this is just part of what we need to do. We need to reach out. We need to understand, um, all of these conditions that are holding our brothers down, not just economically, but causing, and contributing to depression and anxiety, substance use, suicide. Our young Black boys and girls are the highest growing number of suicides in our country. And so, and so from that article, at least, in other studies, we can see that, I used to think when I was younger, depression does not look the same for African people as it does for white folks, because basically we're too busy working and running and racing and trying to keep all the balls up in the air and keep all the family together and all this stuff, that we don't always look sad and depressed. We don't always, except for now with this pandemic, most of us don't usually just have the luxury of staying in bed and throwing the covers over our head and just, sitting and not doing anything, which is what depression usually looks like for white folks. But and throughout my work as a therapist, you know, I was less likely to have African clients or Black clients who were suicidal. That's changing now. That has been changing. That more and more, with the pressures, and I think not only the pressures, but the disconnection between the pressures and the expectations. So we have these expectations. We're set up to think that if we do all these things, we'll be successful and we'll be healthy and happy and we'll have, 3.2 kids and a dog and a white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. And that just doesn't work out. And that contributes to that depression. Um, and so we really need to be honest and have conversations about depression and suicide and anxiety and the diminishing quality of life for our brothers, and how we can reach out and surround them in our community and support them and love them. That doesn't give them anybody an excuse to, you know, take advantage of women or anything like that, but you got to be realistic. I mean, as adults, we have to support and take care of each other. We need to be
Well,
realistic about what's really going on and help each other. And, you know, I mean, I just needed to say that thing because I know that as much as we'd like to think that abuse doesn't happen, it does happen. But, you know, we also don't need to put anybody in a situation where we're not safe. And maybe at the next show, I'll talk about um, domestic violence. But in terms of trying to have healthy relationships and trying to support our brothers in our community, I mean, we can just see how much how much brothers need mental health care. And I will also say that in my years as a therapist, just like brothers are least likely to go to the doctor and get medical care, they are the least likely people to come to therapy. So, you know, therapy doesn't always have to look like, you know, a counselor, you know, in an office. Therapy can be whatever it is that you need it to be. But people need to be able to, part of being able to survive and thrive is being able to be mentally strong and healthy. Um, I know also as a, you know, preparedness strategy expert and expert in martial arts and self-defense. I mean, I know we've also had conversations about how important it is to be mentally prepared and mentally strong. I don't know if you want to share anything about that.
I would like to add to that. I mean, the U.S. military, we're talking special forces, found out that if the mind is willing, the body can be pushed 10 times beyond its normal endurance. But the mind has to be willing to face that struggle, and then the body can be pushed, and the body will step up. To me, a lot of people are seeking peace of mind and to find their self-worth. And first, you got to take yourself out of toxic environments that some people are in. You're around petty people that want to criticize and down you every time, but are they stepping forward with information to help you or teach you how to do something better? They just want to be the Debbie Downer and shoot you down. He's stupid or she's stupid. Look all the mistakes they keep making. Well, what are they doing to step in to try to teach you the right way to do something? That's the reason why I share information. I get a lot of self-worth out of sharing information. When people occasionally post something back to me on Facebook and say, well, you made me see a different side, or you helped me to add something to what I've learned, I feel really good inside knowing that I helped somebody. You know, I could keep the secrets. I could keep it all to myself and just go for myself. But anyone thinking like that is selfish. We're all in this world together, and we got to find a way to work together. I mean, there's a rule that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. I mean, when you saw that guy with the bow and arrow on the highway pointing a bow and arrow at the protesters and people came in behind him, he can't protect his back. Now, if he had had a second person with him that could have watched his back, well, 2 is 1. You can cover 360 degrees all the way around you. But you by yourself, you can only go so far. There's a saying that no one can be truly successful without taking others along with. I mean, you'll see someone like, say, Jay-Z at the top, and you'll see his face, you think Jay-Z's is a genius, but what you don't see is the people in the background that are covering all the bases he can't cover, that are researching, finding things, helping him out, to help prop him up. So in order for him to be who he is, he can't do that all by himself. There has to be other people that support you. You have to find people that are willing to support you, give you those kind words of encouragement or whatever. I mean, even in your relationships, I mean, we we saw recently in the 2-month shutdown where people were around each other, suicides went up, domestic violence went up. I mean, the 1 month of the year where suicides are the biggest is December because of the depression. But now these months are rivaling that period. And domestic violence, instead of screaming and hollering at your woman or whatever during a downturn, know what it is. Know that the hardest thing you're going to have to do is get along with each other.
Yeah.
And find the kind words, find the words that's going to build up, build one another up, not tear each other down, not tear down each other's self-esteem. That's counterproductive, you know. So I think if people would be more supportive, and even if you've got enemies, I mean, I've got enemies, and I would say if I see them doing something right, I'll tell them in a minute, you know, whether I want to admit to it or not. You did a great job, man. I thought that was wonderful. And they might look at me and they might grimace or mean mug me or something back, but I give credit where credit's due. If someone's doing something better than me, or someone I started teaching goes beyond me, I'm happy for them. You know, I've done my part. I helped to elevate that person. Now somebody else can work with them and try to build them up even further. So that's just the way I feel. Try to help people find their self-worth, don't tear them down. And the more knowledge that you can acquire, like in medicines, like you was reading that article and it talked about how there's disparages in medicine and racism in medicine and us. If we learn about healing herbs and healing oils and other alternative medicines, that goes a long way to building your confidence up and being able to heal yourself. And when you actually do it, and I've done it with animal antibiotics, I've cured myself of things, and I felt pretty good. Saved myself a ton of money over going to the doctor's office, but I really felt good to find out that this stuff can actually work in a disaster situation. And then I'm that much more confident if I have to treat somebody else that's a loved one that I care about, rather than sit there and watch them die because I had the ability to treat them and I didn't do nothing but just watch them day by day deteriorate.
And you know, that makes me think about, you know, like I was saying, we have these false expectations in this society, but it's a trick bag and it's not set up for us to be successful. So we end up having these mental health problems and, you know, engaging in domestic violence and acting out and substance use and all kind of stuff. But if we get back to self-reliance, if we get back to learning how to take care of ourselves and support each other, you know, this is not the only game in town. It's not the only game in town. But the illusion is that it is. You know,
And
we need to tear up the whole game board and make our own. You know what I'm saying? And nobody can take that away from us. You know what I'm saying? As long as we're breathing, we have the ability to determine for ourselves how we're going to live today. We have the ability to do that. And every day, just collecting water, collecting food, collecting candles and matches in case all the electricity's off and it's the middle of the night and all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Working together, organizing, building each other up. You know, all of these things help us to be the healthy African men and women that we know that we are. It's
right.
one thing thinking it, like I believe, you know, you know, but it's another thing actually doing it and manifesting it in your life. That creates that takes self-confidence to a whole new level. When you're like, I got this and I got that, and I see people all around me running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and oh me, oh my, what's gonna happen? And you're like, I'm okay. You know, I'm okay. You know, it's so much healthier. I know
Yeah.
we're way out of time. So
Well, let me add one more thing.
yeah,
One more
okay,
thing.
one more thing.
I also want to stress that we need to get back to the strength of the family unit. That's one of the last power bases that we have in our community.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, we sat down to the dinner table, the family did, every day. Sunday dinner, you look forward to it. You look forward to Sunday little ride or drive somewhere or having a little picnic where the family done things together. Today, I go to a family reunion or I go to, say, a Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner. I'm looking at the younger nieces and nephews and they're like this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how's things going? Oh, they're okay. And it's like whoever's on this phone is more important than family.
Mm.
I don't even know you. You know, you're a stranger to me. I want to get to know you. I want us to have a relationship. Right. But this technology is stealing that away.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize it for what it is and bring back the strength of the family unit.
And that's a African principle of Sankofa, to go back and fetch it and bring it into today. And what you're talking about is we need to get back to basics. You know, those are the things that have helped us to survive for generations. And we've allowed ourselves to become sucked into this illusion that's disconnected us from our source. So I'm very grateful. I know it's been a long show. I hope that everybody gets a lot out of it. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with
Our
us.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.
And take care. Thanks so much for watching our show. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications of new shows. If you'd like to know more information about Aaron Olinger and Aaron's Imports, you can contact him on his Facebook page, or you can email him at olinger125@aol.com. If you need help for mental health problems, concerns, or to get consultations or presentations, you can contact Dr. Nzingha Dalila at Noetica Wellness, Mental Health Research, Development, and Treatment. Our website is noetica.org, and you can contact us through email at ndalila@noetica.org.